We know we're running a bit late today, so we're going to whiz through our presentation in a little quicker than 20 minutes that we're allocated, but we'll still leave you some time for questions. And in fact, we want to start today with a question for you and get a bit of audience participation here. We're interested to know, just to inform what we're going to talk to you about today, how many of you have been to a library in the past 12 months? Fabulous.
That's great.
I think we're preaching to the converted, which is great. Anyhow, some of you didn't put your hands up, and it's our mission today both to challenge your understanding of what libraries are today and into the future, and also for those of you who haven't been to a library lately, to inspire you to come back. Peter?
Indeed, and we know that libraries have a special significance for most of us. In fact, probably everyone here has some fond memory of having spent time in a library, either as a child or through school or through university. What we also know is that most of you probably haven't been back in a very long time, and it's incumbent upon us to change that. So over the next 20 minutes, we'll dispel some of the myths that surround libraries and seek to identify and to demonstrate to you all where the real value lies. We'll share some of our plans for self-disruption and show you what the State Library is doing, picking up on a theme from the panel earlier, to reinvent ourselves. And you might think that, sitting here, that libraries are very different to the corporate sector, but the interesting thing is that disruption and digital disruption is playing its way through the library sector in some very similar ways. The impact of digital technology is fundamentally changing the way that libraries operate. The upside of that is that libraries sit on the edge of a very significant point of reinvention. As some of you may know, the State Library has embarked on an $83 million 5-year project to redevelop significant parts of both its business model and its physical layout. This has given us a unique opportunity to change the thinking about what a library is and to create tomorrow's library today. And we'll talk about that a bit more a bit later on.
This slide is a photograph from the library collection. It's by Rennie Ellis from the 1970s. And we're showing you this slide because I think it shows that what's considered cool comes and goes. And we're not interested in fads at the State Library. We're not interested in being cool, but we're hoping that if we do our jobs right, libraries will last much longer than a fad. And we're interested really in relevance and longevity for the library industry. And so we're going to talk today about how at the State Library we plan to stay relevant. And it's impossible to talk about relevance and about disruption, which is one of the themes today, without first addressing some of the common misconceptions about what libraries are. And the first of these misconceptions is the death of the library. And it's this idea that nobody really uses libraries anymore. Well, that's just not true. Around the world, there's more than 1.4 million libraries being used by over 930 million people. That's a lot. And closer to home, more than 45% of the Victorian population are members of their local library. And that number is on the rise continuously, and that's certainly the case at the State Library too. So every year we get more than 1.7 million people through the doors. That makes us the busiest library in the country. It makes us a busier library than the British Library in London, and we get more visitors than the Library of Congress in Washington. But it's not just about numbers through the door. We get 3.7 million people accessing our website and online services. Our digitised collections attract more than 195,000 searches every month. And our digitised historical newspapers, which are on Trove at the National Library, get more than 760,000 page views per month.
But I guess, rather than just take our word for it, it's handy to put a commercial layer over the top of it and to look at what the markets think. And a perfect example is Ex Libris. Ex Libris is one of the world's leading library management and catalogue software vendors. Basically, its entire client base is libraries. And if libraries are in decline, then you would imagine that companies like Ex Libris would struggle to get funding and investment. But clearly no one's told Ex Libris that. They were first acquired by Francisco Partners in 2006 for about $45 million. Then in 2012, they were acquired by Golden Gate Capital for an estimated $250 million. And then they were bought by ProQuest at the end of last year for around $500 million. That doesn't sound much like a decline. But this idea of decline persists regardless, and it stems in part from the idea that libraries are just about books. And that's the thing about books. It's really easy to mistake the message for the medium. And books are one of the most successful transfer mediums in history. But for all their beauty, they're fundamentally an information carrier, like a floppy disk or a vinyl record. Their function is to share ideas. So saying a decline in the popularity of books signals a decline in the popularity of libraries is a bit like saying that a decline in the popularity of vinyl records heralds the end of popular music. Or as David Lenke said recently, saying that libraries are just about books is like saying that doctors are just about scalpels. Libraries are about the message, not the medium.
But it's certainly true that people's expectations about where and how they access information are changing. We all know that. And as universities well know, the knowledge sector is being disrupted significantly. The way people access and consume knowledge and the way that they learn is changing fundamentally. And like universities, libraries have to evolve to remain relevant and to keep pace with those needs. And to do this, libraries need complete clarity about their purpose. But the connection between libraries and books has led to a misconception about that purpose.
A library is not a book warehouse, and it's not a book museum. Yet that's often the way that libraries are considered. The former suggests some sort of inventory management role, and the latter suggests a place of reverence. But over the years, libraries have actually played a role in perpetuating these misconceptions by reinforcing the role of the library as the source and the gatekeeper of knowledge. And I guess historically, in a world where libraries cornered the knowledge market, that theory kind of worked. But in a world where information is everywhere, it doesn't stack up, and it raises a rather uncomfortable question for libraries. If information is ubiquitous and knowledge is no longer a monopoly commodity, where does that leave the library? And it's a good question, but it's a similar question to the questions that are confronting other sectors, including retail, banking, publishing. It's a question that forced us to take a step back and to challenge the history behind what we do and to work out what's really important and what's going to be important into the future. And when we did, we realised that libraries are at a tipping point. Technology now gives us the ability to completely re-engineer the library experience at a time when public goodwill for libraries is probably at an all-time high, and the appetite for change within libraries is even higher.
And after all, libraries at their core have always been about bringing people, communities, and ideas together. Free access to information and ideas is fundamental to a civilised and democratic society. And the 19th century visionaries and philanthropists who set up the great public libraries around the world understood this, but they also understood something deeper. They saw the capacity of libraries as a space for communities and for individuals to learn, to create and to exchange ideas and to be inspired. They understood from their own experiences the transformative effects of knowledge and the sheer wonder of discovering something new. These experiences change lives, and at their core, that's what libraries really do. Libraries create a third space outside of work and outside of home to access knowledge and ideas. There's been a library technology conference running down the river this week called VALA. down at the Convention Centre, and one of the keynote speakers said something that I think encapsulates this perfectly. David Lankeys said, "Libraries are a safe space for accessing dangerous ideas."
And finding those ideas isn't always as simple as a Google search. Sometimes it's all about questions, and this is a quote from Kevin Kelly from Wired magazine that says, "In a world of cheap and free answers, having answers really isn't all that significant or important. Having a really good question will be where all the value is." And fundamentally, that's what libraries do. They help us to find the right questions. But they do much more than that. At the core of it, the job of a librarian is not stacking books. It's about inspiring people, firing the desire to be curious, and encouraging a love of continual learning and discovery. But doing this in the digital world means a profound shift in the way that libraries think about themselves and what they do. So we asked ourselves questions about the role of the librarian, about the control of knowledge and our part in that, and about the way that people experience the library and the way we build and provide a UX experience for our systems. And ultimately, we ended up flipping the entire model entirely. So the ideal new library experience is obviously one that places people at the centre of the process and then crafts the systems and the discovery experiences around them.
And right now we're in the thick of creating the new library with people at the centre of our thinking. We use the design thinking approach to map and understand how people currently use the library and to look at ways how we can make that experience better into the future. And so between now and 2020, we're re-engineering the library experience within and beyond the library walls. Much of this change will leverage emerging technologies to create new discovery experiences and empower people to explore, create, and own our collections. And these are some of the principles that underpin our new library. We want to welcome everyone into the library. That includes children, teenagers, families. This hasn't always been the case at the State Library. We were a research library. We were really focused on academics and scholars, but now we're opening up the doors and we're welcoming everyone. We want the library experience to be engaging and inspiring, whether you come through the door to use the library or whether you access us online. And we're going to nurture the collaborators, the innovators and the creators, as well as the contemplators, to build a fabulous and diverse library community. We want discovery in the library to be a joy. We're adapting our systems instead of making people work around them. And we're handing ownership of our vast collection of 8 million items back to the people of Victoria to discover, play, explore and remix. We're in the story business. Stories of people and places are at the heart of the library, and we want to share those stories widely.
And to that end, across the sector, galleries, museums and libraries are part of a huge global experiment to get collection content into the wild as quickly and in as many forms as we possibly can, and then to see what people do with them. We're contributing to that with a mobile-friendly website that departs from the traditional catalogue model that you're probably all familiar with and encourages people to explore our collections in new and interesting ways. We built a remix section where people can download more than 70,000 copyright-free images, remix them, and then share them back with us and also with their social networks. And we've digitised more than 470,000 items from our collection and created somewhere in the order of 3 million digital files that are now all available online. And we'll digitise another 50,000 items before year end. So over time, our plan is to turn the tide of information so it's less about us pushing out and providing content and more about people contributing and entire communities contributing to the collections in new and different ways.
So we mentioned earlier that we're doing a 5-year, $83 million building redevelopment. And as part of that redevelopment, we're completely reimagining the layout of the library. And that's not easy in a building or buildings. We've got 23 buildings that take up an entire city block. And it's a little bit like Hogwarts. There's secret passages and there's ghosts in the stacks. And it's a little bit like being John Malkovich in that there are floors that have half windows and mezzanines. So it's quite a complex building. But we're putting people at the centre of that design thinking. And the people that use the library now are very diverse, and their expectations of their experience with the library are equally diverse. So as part of that redevelopment, we're creating collaboration areas where groups can discuss and exchange ideas freely and passionately. And the entire ground floor of the library we're turning over into an active space. We'll have new high-speed digital access. We'll have dedicated spaces for children and families, a dedicated space for teenagers, and an area for digital creation and new technologies. Innovators and entrepreneurs will have a new home at the library, and the library will become a place of creativity and development. But we'll also have quiet spaces for reflection, research and contemplation. The library is, after all, for many people, a sanctuary from the hustle and bustle of a busy city. We want the library to be a place where you can switch on, but where you can also switch off. But we know that creating a new experience takes a lot more than just a change to the floor plan. So we're already changing the way that we provide services to the community. We're liberating our staff from behind the monolithic information desks, and we've given them iPads so they can help people where they need help, anywhere in the library. And digital experiences around the library will encourage visitors to explore and own our collections in new and playful ways. And we're starting to look into the opportunities of 360-degree video and virtual reality so people can immerse themselves in our collections in ways that have never been possible in the physical world. In fact, some of our exhibitions will only ever exist in the digital world. So in some ways, the way forward for the library is, in a sense, a return to its past. And we're building on the 19th century founding values of the library, but in the context of new technologies, the growth of the knowledge and creative industries, and broadening out to a more diverse and savvy community. I just wanted to mention this book that I brought along, because I'm a librarian, so I do have a book, which is called Bibliotech, and it's written by John Palfrey. He's a law professor, not a librarian. John was the first non-librarian to manage the Harvard Law Library, which was pretty radical at the time. He then became the founding director of the Digital Public Library of America, which is a fully online library, which is a collaboration between libraries across the states. And Palfrey in this book talks about the idea that people love libraries. People essentially think that libraries are a good thing, but they don't necessarily use them. And he talks about the idea that a lot of what people think about libraries is nostalgic. So they have these wonderful memories of sort of exploring the dusty stacks and finding an amazing book and sitting down and reading it. But his challenge to libraries is that we need to create a new nostalgia, and new memories for people. And I think, something that I find when I tell people I work at the State Library of Victoria is that everyone who's grown up in Melbourne has some story about the State Library, about how they used to love coming as a kid or how they used to love coming when they were a student, but they haven't necessarily come back for a long time. So it's really our challenge at the State Library to create a new nostalgia and new memories for people using the library. And we've hoped today that we've debunked some of the myths and some of the misconceptions about libraries. And to those of you who haven't visited a library in a while, we really hope that we've inspired you to come back soon. We'd really love to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.